It's probably a bit difficult to make out what's going on here. I'll try and explain it. So here is the crossover board, and we've got our positive and negative coming in. Let's try and go through this. So the woofer positive and woofer negative is in there, coming up to our woofer cables here. Mid-range, so I've jumped from positive to the positive in of our mid-range circuit because I may need to add a resistor here, so there's nothing there at the moment. So through our high pass, and then out up to here. And what I've done at the moment is clip together the original low pass, because this is the bit that I'm going to have to muck around with, and I can do that up here. So that's that bit. And then on our HF 1300 circuit, which is here, again I've taken a positive in. Again, I may need a resistor there, so I've just jumped across at the moment. Through that to our HF 1300 out of phase. So cable there, that's grounding it. And then our super tweeter circuit here, same thing. So white cable to the positive of the super tweeter, and where is it? Black cable at the back to the negative. So yeah, I can work on the mid-circuit integration here. That's what I want to play around with, not the HF 1300 or super tweeter circuit. I want to keep them as they are because they are fantastic in the BC1, so I don't want to alter those. Our mid rolling off into the woofer is absolutely fine. So, you know, as well as changing these values, we'll probably get some phase issues, which may involve me doing something with the HF 1300 circuit. The knock-on effect of that will be the super tweeter circuit. We'll just have to see. The woofer is obviously the reference for the whole system. So yeah, there we go. Components down here ready. Yeah, I'm not going to bother putting out my room treatment or anything. I'm just going to get some crude measurements done first and go from there. Right, so I've been doing all my measurements, and originally the section of the mid-range circuit that rolls off into the tweeter had a 0.66 millihenry inductor and a 6 microfarad capacitor, so second order on that part of the circuit. I've mucked around with a few different inductor sizes, increasing in value to pull the roll-off back. So we pull the crossover point down. Initially it was about 5 kilohertz. I've settled on a 0.9 millihenry inductor with a 4.7 microfarad cap, which has pulled the crossover point down to about 3.5 kilohertz now. And honestly, I'm gobsmacked how well it's worked out. It really has. Just adjusting that part of the mid-range circuit, which theoretically was the only part I needed to muck around with. Yeah, everything else has stayed the same basically, and the crude measurements I've got are really good. Right, so let's shoot a 1 meter on HF 1300 axis measurement and see what we end up with. And already, without smoothing that, you can kind of, if you were to take the average all the way through, we're looking pretty good. So what I'll do, I'll use the standard 1/3 octave smoothing, apply that, and there we go. What I will then do is gate this slightly. Which helps out our bottom end. This really is the room that's causing this, so I'm not particularly worried about it. But our integration with our mid-range and our HF 1300 and our super tweeter you know, is fantastic. Ignoring this little bit going on here, we're probably plus minus 2.5 dB, and our sensitivity is still really good. We're averaging 90.02 dB, which I think is bloody fantastic. I've played some music through them and they sound really good. So what I'm going to do now is measure the individual drivers. So bear with me a second. Right, so this is going to be the mid-range and the Coles super tweeter on their own. I can't disconnect the super tweeter because I soldered it directly, but that shouldn't be an issue. Right, let's smooth that. So I'll roll off, it's about 4.5, whereas before it was right up in the 5.5. And our little Coles super tweeter is coming in at sort of 12. So what I'll do now, I'll do the woofer, and yeah, just the woofer on its own to start with. Again, we still have the super tweeter connected. Right. So as you can see here, our woofer is starting to roll off heavily at about 650 Hertz, drops off very heavily. Again, we've still got our Coles super tweeter connected. So yeah, you can kind of see what the mid-range is doing and what the woofer is doing and what our super tweeter is doing. So let's do the HF1300 on its own, but again it will have the super tweeter connected. Right, so yellow line, which I'll highlight there, is our HF1300 and super tweeter. Yeah, I'm just pleased with how quickly that's just come together. So anyway, a few more tweaks to go, I'm sure. I mean, this is the BC1's roll-off, which I wanted to stick with. All I've done with the mid-range is pull it back a little bit. And they're integrating really nicely, so yeah, I really can't complain at all. So what I'll do, I'll put all this together properly and then do some off-axis measurements, and hopefully we're about there. Right, I've been playing around with the resistor value that bridges the inductor on the super tweeter, and as you can see, I've brought this level up a little bit. So that's where we were before and that's where we are now. So potentially I've pronounced this dip a little bit more. There it's sort of flatter, but overall I think the level is better. The other thing I've done is introduced a 1.5 ohm resistor on the HF1300, so hasn't really made a huge difference when you look at it that way. And I've also added a 1 ohm resistor, that's all, onto the mid-range circuit, which has reduced this bump here. So it's just sort of pulled that down. Here there's quite a deviation from what, 800 hertz up to about a kilohertz of 1, 2, 3, 4 dB, whereas here it's more like 3, but it's just a little bit flatter. So yeah, really and truly, where it is now, a lot of this is the room interacting with my measurements, although I've gated them. You know, we're within plus minus 2.5 dB from 250 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz, which is pretty bloody mad, really. So I'm really pleased with it. Really pleased with it. The phase relationship between the drivers, whilst there is obviously a phase change, there's always going to be, it's progressive, gradual, and very smooth. This is about the crossover point for between the mid and the woofer. But in terms of how the mid integrates with the HF1300 and how the HF1300 integrates with a Coles Super Tweeter, really nice and smooth. Mega pleased. So next thing is to put the crossover together properly and then do proper measurements, because if you look at that mess, it's full of crocodile clips and leads and that sort of thing. So I would expect that all to smooth out a bit more, measurement wise. That's normally the case once you get all this mess out of the signal path. But yeah, really and truly, I'm very, very happy with where we've ended up. Pretty cool.